Okay, let us begin. Judges, students, are we all here? Danielle?
Yes,
I'm here. I was just emailing the virtual background.
Okay, not a problem. So let us begin. Good morning again, everyone. My name is Michelle Toller, Executive Director for the National Tourism Debate. Welcome to the first match of the 2021 National Tourism Debate online via Zoom. We would like to commend our team at One Love TV for digitizing our competition, and this could not be possible without the kind sponsorship of the following companies: the Tourism Enhancement Fund, Camco Hotel and Restaurant Supplies, Deja All-Inclusive Resort, ProSight Optical, Tony Ward Auto, Royalton Luxury Resorts, the Jamaica Observer, and Ad Intelligence Limited. The 2021 National Tourism Debate is endorsed by the Ministry of Education, the Montego Bay Chamber of Commerce, the GHTA, and CGM Gallagher. Our judges this morning: Attorney at Law Stacey Young, Chief Judge; Robin Russell, First Vice President of the JHTA, Jamaica Hotel and Tourism Association; and Cheryl Bromfield, Communications Director in the Ministry of Education. Please, can we have a round of applause for our judges and our sponsors? Or we can just do a virtual thumbs up. Our moot for today: no movement days will not affect visitor arrivals or the private sector. Proposing the moot is Mannings High, and opposing the moot is Wolmer's Girls. Our speakers are from Mannings High School: Michaela Smith, Calicia Bassel, and Danique Gale, and that's first, second, and third speaker. From Wolmer's Girls, we have Monique Brown, second speaker Rihanna McDuffus, and third speaker Aaliyah Thompson. Now for the times. The first speaker is allowed 7 minutes, the second speaker 5 minutes, and the third speaker 3 minutes, followed by a rebuttal, which will begin with the opposing team. This is approximately 3 minutes. The match will begin with our proposing team, Mannings High. We will now proceed with our first match, Mannings High versus Wolmer's Girls. Let us have our first speaker from Mannings High School. Mannings High?
Yes, we're here. Should I begin?
Sure, go ahead.
Distinguished judges, my fellow teammates, and the members of the opposition, ladies and gentlemen of the audience, good morning. My team and I stand resolute in proposition of this moot. No movement days will not have an effect on visitor arrivals or the private sector. This is a simply stated moot. Hence, there is no need to define or restate this motion. On August 19, 2021, the Prime Minister of Jamaica, the Honorable Andrew Holiness, announced 7 days of no movement for the general public, which they were mandated to observe as an attempt to contain the spread of the deadly novel coronavirus. My opponents will say that these no movement days would have caused major damage to the private sector and visitor arrival in Jamaica. However, we on said proposition will prove that no movement days will not and have not had adverse impacts on the private sector or tourism. As the first speaker, I will be laying the foundation to prove that 1, visitor arrivals and the private sector will not be negatively impacted by no movement days, and 2, I will show to you how the economy also benefited from tourism on the no movement days. My second speaker will prove how the no movement days have helped aspects of our economy using varied examples. And my third speaker will show that visitors were not impacted as all tourism partners remain open for business on the no movement days, and will summarize our strong arguments. We will accept that as humans are social creatures, The no movement days affect that social nature. We contend that despite the change in behaviors, that visitor arrivals and the private sector have not been negatively impacted by the no movement days. We want to make it abundantly clear that there have been impacts on visitor arrivals and the private sector due to the pandemic, which has caused 1, disruption to global travel, 2, lost income, and 3, reduced consumption, among other adverse reactions. Said opposition has to prove why it is the no movement days and not those factors which have had an impact on visitor arrivals. We argue that a mere correlation is not causation, and with the multiplicity of factors, there is no way that no movement days can take the brunt of the blame. In fact, we will prove how no movement days have helped aspects of our economy. Our frustration, our anger, our need to be like the way we were before is not a measure of those effects on the 2 aspects of our country's economy. Side proposition will give you the facts in measurable terms. In total, we had 18 no movement days, 8 of which were weekdays and 10 of which were Sundays. For my arguments to come across, it is important for me to highlight and for you to note that Sundays are known to be no movement days for tourists. It is unreasonable to believe that 18 out of the 365 and a quarter days would have had any impact on tourist arrivals. May I ask, on what days were the airports closed? Allow me to answer for you, not one. A country will not be all sunshine and rainbows throughout the year, and an event such as this pandemic is affecting all countries alike, and they had to take drastic measures to protect their people. In retrospect, Jamaica has to protect us. Let us be clear that visitor arrivals have fallen since the start of the pandemic. This is due to the restrictions on global travel, vaccine requirements, and quarantine restrictions. We would like to remind this House that 70% of Jamaica's tourists stay in hotels for the duration of their visit. This is a very important reminder because the hotels will not and have not been affected by the no movement days. Hotel workers and tourists will and have continued their activities just as normal on the resilience corridor set up for tourism, completely unaffected. We will also prove that cruise activities continued. Remember, the reduction in travel during COVID-19 overall is not the result of the no movement days. It is a result of restriction on travel globally, lost income globally, and vaccine protocols. There is no way to associate the no movement days in particular with reduction in tourism, since the government honored all arrangements, allowed flights to land, allowed cruise ships to enter, and exempted tourist staff from the no movement days. As a final extension of this point, persons looking at destinations to travel will be drawn to destinations that are taking steps towards protecting against COVID-19. Measures such as no movement days signal to tourists that the country is serious about containment of COVID. This is not only a positive for the current demand, but also for the future of tourism and the image of the destination brand Jamaica. With regards to the private sector, which tourism is a part of, we want to assert that this is a general situation which has resulted from the pandemic. This is unemployment and lost income since the onslaught of the pandemic. No movement days, however, will not and have not worsened this situation. In fact, we argue that sales have been healthy during the periods affected by no movement days. We argue that with tourism activities all facilitated, with the excessive shopping before no movement days, delivery services, work from home, 52 categories of workers exempted, the no movement days will not and have not adversely affected tourism or the private sector. All the effects that side opposition will highlight are impacts of the pandemic generally and will not and have not been worsened by no movement days. I will now leave my second and third speaker to further substantiate our stance on the moot and show us in fact that it is the pandemic itself that has caused the negative effects on the visitor arrivals and the private sector and not the no movement days. I thank you.
Thank you, Mannings. We will now have the first speaker from Wolmer's Girls, Dominique Brown.
Should I begin? Should I begin?
Dominique, go ahead. Jamie, can you spotlight her as soon as she begins? Just a reminder that the speakers, your video should be on. Is it possible?
It is
Yes,
on. Can you hear us and see us clearly?
yes, we can.
Okay. Esteemed educators, exquisite timekeepers, Madam Moderator, viewers, members of the government, and fellow members of the opposition, a pleasant good morning. Today, we are gathered to dissect the news. No movement days will not affect visitor arrivals or the private sector. We, the opposition, scoff at the absurdity of this stance. Allow me to designate the areas in which my colleagues and I will focus on to prove our stance. As the first speaker, I will be fixated on the impact of no movement days on the tourism industry and the private sector. My second speaker will follow to discuss the effects of no movement days on visitor arrivals. And lastly, my final speaker shall tie up our arguments and put forward evidence to support the validity of the aforementioned arguments. Before we begin to prove the idiocy of this notion, we must first elucidate the key terms: no movement days, private sector, and the word visitor. While there is no official definition for the term no movement days, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, movement is defined as the act or process of movement. Therefore, we can infer that no movement days are days in which the process of moving is prohibited. According to the Oxford Dictionary, the term private sector is defined as the part of the national economy that is not under direct state or government control. The term visitor, as stated by the Oxford Dictionary, refers to a person visiting somewhere or someone, especially a tourist. According to the 2014 Jamaica Private Sector Assessment Report, the private sector of Jamaica employs almost 90% of the labor force. Tourism industry is linked to many industries such as transportation, accommodation, food and beverage, commerce, and entertainment, each of which comprises companies which fall under the private sector of Jamaica. In March 2020, the World Health Organization declared the COVID-19 a global pandemic. Since the first recorded case of the virus in Jamaica, the government proposed measures to combat the outbreak of the virus, such as limited and no movement days. Approximately 40 no movement days have been reported, which have affected businesses in Jamaica from thriving at their highest potential. The restriction of movement has prevented operations of businesses and in some instances closure. Hotels and restaurants, which were regarded as one of the fastest growing industries pre-COVID, took the largest hit. According to Dr. Henry Wayne from the Planning Institute of Jamaica, speaking at the Economy and Production Committee, which was live streamed on November 17, 2021, the hotel and restaurants industry declined by 65.6%. The entertainment and sports industry down by 28%, and the transport and communications industry down by 13.6%. Each of these industries had one thing in common that spoke to their detrimental impact: the restrictions on movement, more specifically, no movement days. Between January and July 2020, as stated by Dr. Wayne, the country reported a decline in the market of 151,100 persons in January to 1,121,600 persons in July. And 88.3% of those members belong to the persons with no formal training, persons in the entertainment industry, food and services, and accommodation. In other words, persons are part of the private sector. Now I know you must be inundated by the many statistics thrown at you, but it served the purpose of substantiating my claim, the conviction of the opposition. That is, no movement days have indeed affected the private sector of Jamaica. Affected but have devastated the different industries that fall under its umbrella. Stay with me.
as I recall the events of my personal experience, having witnessed firsthand the impact of no movement days on a particular business which falls under the private sector of Jamaica. We all know the popular company Project Sandals that supplies the Jamaican people with beautiful and sturdy sandals. My mama loves these sandals and wished to purchase one of these sandals for her birthday. Now we went to this establishment, and it was the first in my several visits that I saw the shelves so sparsely populated with products. My mom tried desperately to find the sandals she wanted, but to no avail, and naturally she was devastated. As told by the manager, which further emphasized my point, the increased no-movement days and curfew hours reduced their output immensely. Workers could not produce the same amount of efficiency prior to these restrictions. Jamaicans island-wide may have similar experiences. That is the unavailability of products of their choice as one thing looks through across the island. Let's revert to COVID statistics. A representative from the private sector organization of Jamaica stated that from an in-house survey, it was reported that the micro, small, and medium enterprise, which employs 82% of the labor force in the private sector, reported almost twice the impact on their economy in comparison to the overall Jamaican economy at a 20% decline. The no-movement days have also hit a little bit closer to home with regards to the craft vendors in the tourism industry. According to a presentation shown by Ms. Abigail Henry Hernandez, a representative of the Jamaica Tourist Board, in 2019, the tourism industry recorded 4.2 million visitors, and in 2020, 1.3 million visitors due to the pandemic. Due to this, the tourism industry depended heavily on local visitors to generate income for their industry. In layman's terms, no-movement days have also affected the craft vendors who depend heavily on the masses of people who provide a market for their goods and steady income for their business. No-movement days have had adverse effects on the private sector, and many businesses in the varying sectors under its portfolio have suffered drastically. It was stated by Dr. Henry Wade, and I quote, "The fallout was greatest for countries like Jamaica, which are dependent on people movement and gathering, such as the tourism industry." I rest my case.
Thank you, Wolmer's girls. We will just give the judges a few minutes to make notes on their points of the first speakers, maybe 2 minutes, and then we will go into the second speaker. Okay, judges, can we go? Second speakers, are you ready? All right, we will now take the second speaker, Calicia Vassell from Mannings School. Calicia?
Yes, I'm ready.
Okay, go ahead. And Daniel, please spotlight, or Jamie.
Esteemed adjudicators were the opponents. In regards to what the first speaker said, during the dry months, that is May to November, within the tourism sector, the country normally depends on domestic visitors. So such a statement is really neither here nor there in regards to the mood today. More so, in regards to the unavailability of goods to Jamaicans, need I remind you that Jamaica is currently lacking in the importation fluidity, which is linked to the global pandemic and not no movement days. Hence, once more, such a statement is still neither here nor there in regards to the mood today. To what extent can it truly be said that visitor arrivals will be affected by no movement days when it has been proven that the rigidity of no movement days do not apply to tourists and hence visitor arrival? Fret not, the statistics will speak for themselves. The approximated 1,700 passengers aboard the Carnival Sunrise cruise ship were accommodated at the government-owned Bringata Caves and Dunsriver Falls for the Heroes' Day weekend. Can we truly say that visitor arrival will be affected by the no movement days when to date it has failed to do so? The government has taken and will continue to take the necessary steps such as the establishment of COVID resilient corridors to ensure and promote safe visitor arrival and accommodation, hence combating and alleviating any prospective hits the tourism sector may take in light of COVID precautionary measures. Hence, I echo the sentiment of my first speaker, wherein she proposes that visitor arrivals have not been and will not be affected by no movement days. The Minister of Tourism himself ensures feasible initiatives are taken to stop the spread of the virus while maintaining the country's position as the premier destination in the Caribbean. More so, the tourism sector, which revolves around visitor arrival, is the backbone of the Jamaican economy. Hence, it goes without saying that government initiatives will take strides of unimaginable depth to keep it afloat. Henceforth, is visitor arrival truly being affected, or is it just water off the proverbial duck's back? Lest you forget, the staging of Mocha Fest in May of this year proves that no movement days and other restrictions do not affect visitor arrivals. Despite the COVID precautionary measures, hundreds of visitors were not only allowed to arrive in the country, but more so, they chose to come to Jamaica. This reinforces the country's position as the premier tourist destination, as does the generous list of awards the sector has garnered within the pandemic, having been named not just the leading cruise destination, but the leading vacation destination overall. Does that not prove that tourists are still keen on visiting Jamaica and consider it their prime vacation choice despite no movement days? Let us continue. To reiterate what my first speaker said, any negative deviations in the statistics of tourist arrivals since 2020 were as a result of external factors such as travel advisory bans that were issued against Jamaica. However, this saw a positive change when the bans were lifted and the heavy influx of tourists graced Jamaican soils. Further justification was provided by the Jamaica Gleaner in their November 21, 2021 issue, wherein they reported that the tourist gateway Stansted International Airport has seen a significant increase in total passenger numbers as they report 1.76 million passengers today for 2021 in comparison to 2020's 1.32 million. As cited by mot.gov.jm, September 24, 2021. American Airlines told Tourism Minister Edmund Bartlett that by December 2021, there would be 17 non-stop flights per day to Jamaica as the demand for the destination rises. September 29, 2021. Carnival Corporation, the world's largest cruise line, committed to sending 110 cruises to the island between October 2021 and April 2022. October 4, 2021, Canada's largest airlines confirmed a total of 50 non-stop flights per week between Canada and Jamaica. Hoteliers and thus the private sector stand to gain through linkages between and among sectors. The private sector has seen a massive growth, especially in courier businesses, seen as locals, unlike tourists, must not adhere to the rigidity of no movement days. They opt to order food from outside sources, which, by the way, are private sector organizations, such as popular chain restaurants, and have it delivered by recently established courier businesses such as Seven Crave, which has not only gained much popularity, but also profitability amidst the pandemic. Not only do these newly birthed courier service contribute to the longevity of the private sector, but also the profitability, as it ensures the domino effect of flow of operations in businesses within and outside the food industry. During the no movement days, employers were encouraged to allow their workers to work from home. This is inferred to have upped the productivity output by a significant margin, as less time would have been spent on miscellaneous tasks such as driving to and from work. This time would have then been allocated to working, hence the productivity output would have increased. Thus, with all the benefit the private sector stands to gain, has gained, and will continue to gain, side proposition stands firm in their stance that the private sector will not be affected by no movement days. Herein I must inquire, members of the opposition, is your house truly moved to argue that no movement days will affect the private sector or visitor arrival, or rather that the pandemic on a whole has affected and will affect the private sector or visitor arrivals, which, might I add, is not the same? Esteemed adjudicators, fellow humble opponents on the opposite side of the virtual aisle, I rest my case on the mood presented today in this honorable house. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Mannings High. We will now have the second speaker from Wolmer's girl, Rihanna McDuffus.
May I begin?
Yes, Rihanna, please go ahead.
All protocols observed. As my colleague so eloquently stated, we are here to expostulate the point. No movement days will not affect visitor arrivals or the private sector. As the penultimate speaker, I will reiterate the stance of the opposition, ergo proving the ignorance of the youth, with a distinct focus on the effects of no movement days on visitor arrivals. It is no secret that tourism contributes to much of the country's income, and consequently is of paramount importance to Jamaica's economy. Regrettably, the ad hoc institution of no movement days in August 2021, as a result of a spike in COVID-19 cases on the island, has dealt a severe blow to this cherished sector. According to an article published by The Cleaner on March 15, 2021, the Caribbean Tourism Organization recorded that visitor arrivals declined in the region by a whopping 65%, and the cruise ship arrivals by an astonishing 72%. The reason for this decline was accredited to restrictions established by Caribbean governments, specifically the Jamaican government. Allow me to elucidate. In compliance with an excerpt on Brother World, cited from the World Health Organization, published on August 21, 2021, visitors arriving from countries that have been on the travel restriction list are bound to the same curtailments as Jamaican residents, namely no movement days and restricted gatherings. It further states that travelers 12 years and older are required to provide a negative COVID-19 test 72 hours prior to traveling, and unvaccinated visitors are subject to a mandatory quarantine of 14 days. Despite vaccinated visitors being liable to solely 8 days of quarantine, the fact remains that they are deprived of the basic right of freedom of movement. We have yet to explore the extent of restriction on visitors, as we have all but stated the obvious. The article continues to enumerate that these persons, considered to be low risk, are only allowed to leave their place of abode to obtain food, medical supplies or services, and to conduct financial transactions merely once a day. Now, the real concern is, why are we still trying to decipher whether or not no movement days have any effect on tourist arrivals when all these flagrant prohibitions are being thrown in our faces? As specified by the Jamaica Tourist Board, in order for visitors to experience the slightest ambience of the quintessential Jamaican tourist, they are forced to place bookings in the resilient corridor of the island, which is the northern coast from Negril to Portland, and on the southern coast from Clarendon to Negril. Mind you, they can only visit tourist attractions that are resilient licensed. This sufficiently brings me to my next point. Even though the Jamaica Tourist Board has designed this initiative in an attempt to mitigate the problems in the industry, unfortunately, it will not suffice. Tourism is the people, and the people are tourism. With the introduction of no movement days, the people who contribute to our riveting culture by dancing on the streets, preparing delicacies, or just simply the persons saying hello to passers-by are absent. An interview was carried out in Ocho and a tourist was asked to share her experiences in relation to the numerous times she visited the island. She said, and I quote, "Ocho is like a ghost town now." She emphasized that she longed to interact with the Jamaican people, and although she was privileged to be outside, it was simply not the same. Envision, if you will, after enduring all these restrictions, At last, you are able to have an inch of that real Jamaican experience, only to find that it is not as depicted in the ads or as described by your peers. I ask again, this time to you, my opponents, why are we still debating? I imagine our visitors sacrifice much to experience an industry that is missing its soul. No movement days do affect visitor arrivals. I rest my case.
Thank you, second speakers, Calicia Vassell and Rihanna McDuffus. We will now give our judges some time to deliberate. Both schools are doing very well. Well prepared, I must say your presentation is good and your setup is even better. So thank you for being here this morning and making the effort. I know the coaches tried very hard to work to have you both prepared, both schools prepared, and we appreciate this, especially during the COVID period. Coaches, are you there?
Yes, we are.
Very good coaches. Miss Elliott, Miss White, you did a terrific job. Very good arguments. I can't believe you both thought that you wouldn't be ready. I think you both schools are very good this morning. Okay, third speaker. And we will begin with Mannings School. Third speaker, are you ready for Mannings School? This is Danique Gale.
Yes, we are ready.
You are ready. Okay. All right, let us have a spotlight on Danique, please.
The COVID-19 pandemic came like a thief in the night, unexpected and abrupt. In an attempt to lessen the damage caused by COVID-19, the government implemented no movement days, and the state, along with the citizens, had no choice but to adapt and discover ways in which they could navigate this whirlwind of a pandemic. Distinguished judges and my worthy opponents, a pleasant morning to you all. Our first speaker has laid the foundation in proving that visitor arrivals and the private sector were not negatively impacted by no movement days. It has also been highlighted how the economy also benefited from no movement days. Moreover, our second speaker provided statistical data indicating that a number of visitors arrived and took advantage of the festivities offered by the island without being affected by the no movement days. Still not convinced that no movement days will not affect tourist arrival or the private sector? Well, let me deliver the final nail in the coffin to the opposition's argument. It is impossible that no movement days will affect tourist arrival when personnel and businesses that facilitate or play a part in tourist arrival have been allowed movement on these days. The Jamaica Constabulary Force outlines personnel exempt from these measures. Firstly, are those working in the tourism sector and persons journeying to and from hotels, including persons entering and departing from the island. Additionally, customs and immigration officers are exempt along with persons establishment regulation of the year 2000. If you aren't convinced at this point, visit Jamaica's webpage. Answers the question, what impact do no movement days have on visitors? In its frequently asked questions section, their statement is that visitors to the resilient corridors of Jamaica can be assured that these measures will not impact their vacation activities as all tourism partners remain open for business. To reiterate our second speaker's point, hotels are a part of the private sector. In operating these tourism entities, Jamaica's private sector has remained alive and thrived during no movement days. Team opposition has tried, but was futile in their attempts to prove their stance on the moves. Madam Speaker, sales were on the increase during no movement periods as persons shopped excessively before these days, causing massive spikes in sales. The excess compensated for the lost sales. Therefore, sales and revenue in the private sector were not adversely impacted. Moreover, there was a positive with the implementation of no movement days as a new subsector of the economy emerged as a demand for courier services skyrocketed. The no movement days brought that activity and a high level of associated sales to the forefront. In summarizing our arguments, it is evident that Brand Jamaica did what all countries did in arriving at measures to protect its people and its beloved tourism product. In so doing, the no movement days had no negative impact on tourist arrival or the private sector, but it is rather the global pandemic that we are currently facing, which has had said impact. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, team proposition rests. Thank you.
Thank you, third speaker, Mannings Hyde and Gale. Wolmer's girls, Aaliyah Thompson, will now present.
Hi, Michelle. Before we commence with the third speaker, we just need 1 minute. Just give us a minute, please. Thanks.
Not a problem.
Yeah, Michelle, you can go ahead.
All right, let us have Aaliyah Thompson, Wolmer's girls.
May I begin?
Yes, go ahead, Ms. Thompson, go ahead.
I bid all protocols a pleasant morning. I am thrilled to stand here representing my school in divergence of the mood. No movement days will not affect visitor arrivals or the private sector. My first speaker has dissected the moods and provided statistical data and even first-hand experience of the impact no movement days has had on the private sector. The stance of my worthy opponents was further demolished as my second speaker zeroed in on the effects of no movement days on visitor arrivals with a comparative look at the sector before and during the no movement days. Therefore, my task of tying up our arguments has been simplified. My opponents argue on the basis that the COVID-19 pandemic has affected visitor arrivals and the private sector and not the no movement days. But my teammates and I have and will continue to provide evidence to efface this misconception. The COVID-19 pandemic has been carefully and successfully handled by other countries without the use of no movement days. Countries such as Ireland, Spain, and Finland. These countries are listed among the top 10 COVID resilience ranking. In countries such as our own, Jamaica, the government has applied the use of no movement days, and this has grossly affected the economy, visitor arrivals, and the private sector. The application of no movement days not only affects these areas, but is by extension falling under pressure and leaving the people of our nation to suffer. According to an article published by the International Finance Corporation World Bank Group in February 2021, and I quote, the COVID-19 pandemic is having a significant negative impact on the private sector in developing economies. Notable sector-level impacts include supply and demand-based shocks to infrastructure and private healthcare, disruption to imports, exports, tourism, global and local value chains, end quote. Now, my opponents, who are you to question the facts put forward by these trained professionals who have spent years completing research and studies in this field? How could I even ask this when my opponent sits here blatantly ignoring the events occurring in our own country? The Jamaica Department of Foreign Affairs labeled no movement days as a threat in a highly precaution advisory released on the 30th of July 2021. A threat is something that poses to inflict damage. Therefore, no movement days pose to inflict damage on the tourism sector, and as outlined by my fellow teammates, it already has. In conclusion, I leave my opponents with these simple questions. If people are not allowed to leave their homes and move around, how will they be able to make a living? If the people needed to enhance the experience of our visitors are locked inside their homes, how then will these visitors continue to travel to our country? The opposition rests.
Let's have a round of applause, please, or virtual thumbs up for both schools. We will give you time to prepare your rebuttal. You guys gave us a fiery start to the National Tourism Debate 2021. You were well prepared. I feel very good about this. So our judges will now deliberate a bit on our third speaker while the students will prepare their rebuttals. Daniel, how many do we have with us? Anybody from overseas in our chat room? I saw quite a few friends there. Good morning to our friends joining in our virtual room. Is there anyone that's joining us overseas? Our chat room is very quiet. I hope you're enjoying the match. Daniel, do we have everybody muted while they're not able to speak to us this morning?
Persons are muted, however, they have the option to unmute themselves.
Oh, nobody wants to speak to us. I guess they're very engaged in the match. Judges, you let us know when you're ready for the rebuttals.
Madam Moderator. No, 2 minutes, 2 minutes.
2 minutes?
Yes. Both
We're
judges
ready?
are ready, but we haven't consulted the third judge. So we're going to make a quick
Consulting,
call,
sure.
just to make sure she's ready as well.
They're going in and out. Judges, are we ready?
Thank you, Madam Moderator. The judges are ready for rebuttal.
Okay, welcome back. We will now have our rebuttals from the opposing team, Wolmer's girls. Wolmer's girls.
May I begin?
Yes, you may go ahead.
Allow me the latitude of completion. I must begin by reiterating my point that the COVID-19 pandemic has been carefully and successfully handled by countries such as Denmark and Ireland, who remain resilient without extreme measures, that is, no movement days. Therefore, the foundation of the stance on which my opponents argue has already been crumbled. I must also counteract the misinformation presented by the first speaker of the proposition that there were only 80 no movement days. As stated by my first speaker, the press secretary of the Prime Minister, Naomi Francis, stated that the country has experienced approximately 40 no movement days. I can't help but revert to the statement brought up by my opponents that 70% of Jamaican tourists stay in hotels. But what is the relevance? It is a known fact that tourists reside at hotels but leave at varied intervals to explore the different parts of the islands. Furthermore, my opponent stated that the private sector has benefited by the excessive days of shopping, delivery services, etc. However, it was stated by Dr. Wade that 88.3% of the private sector has lost their jobs. The moods did not ask if we were being protected, but if the private sector and tourist arrivals were affected. I repeat the quote of my first speaker, stated from Dr. Henry Wade. The fallout was greatest for countries like Jamaica, which are dependent on people movement and gathering, such as the tourism industry. The opposition rests.
We will now have our rebuttals from Mannings High. Mannings High, please go ahead.
fellow judges, teammates, and worthy opponents on the opposite side of the aisle, let us not confuse the effects of no movement days with the effects of the global pandemic and the restrictions of such. Your first speaker would have said that the unavailability of goods was caused by the no movement days, but this was due to the global pandemic and its restrictions rather than the no movement days. How could a no movement day affect the importation of goods from other countries? The second speaker reiterated the stance of side proposition, wherein she quite literally said that global restrictions cited are because of the pandemic. She also quoted a tourist who said that the vacation experience in Jamaica was simply not the same. But let me ask you, would you have preferred there be no tourists at all to give any feedback and sink the Jamaican economy in the process? That's something worth considering. Your third speaker would have stated that, once more, reiterating our points, the COVID pandemic affects visitor arrival, which, by the way, is what we are proposing. She also stated that the COVID pandemic affects developing countries. Henceforth, I must say that since it affects developing countries, then this struggle is not limited to Jamaica. Other countries are therefore being affected, hence it is unfair and irrelevant to say that Jamaica's no movement days are the reasons for the struggles being faced by the country. A speaker would have also said that no movement days relinquishes the freedom of movement of the Jamaican citizens. But let me ask you, does the Jamaican government not have a right to protect the citizens of its country? Is that not the basis of the constitutional amendment of Jamaica? We continue to condemn that not only Jamaica, but all countries and the world had restrictions for the pandemic. For example, the vaccine test, which was a part of the COVID restriction measures. Therefore, I conclude to say that the side opposition has tried and failed in their quest to justify and oppose our stance. I thank you.
And I thank you both, Mannings School and Wolmer's Girls. Let's have a round of applause for both schools this morning that kickstarted our National Tourism Debate 2021. I think they did an excellent job. I know there were some reluctances, there was some delays. Having going back to face-to-face school, their students was faced with some challenges, and we appreciate you for making the effort to prepare yourself. Please, whatever the decision is today from the judges, we ask you to still stay with us. We do have sectional prizes. There are things that we may look out for that we will prize you for at the end of the competition. And just a reminder that this year's match, the winner will move on to regional to compete with 3 other countries. So good job. Very, very good job. We're going to give the judges some time to get their scores together. I know it's difficult for them. Just listening to your arguments, I'm thinking to myself, it's so close. Thank you, Danielle. Thank you. I have a wonderful production team. Coaches, are all our students in sixth form? Are they all going to be lawyers? What are we to expect from them? Let's start with Mannings. Hi. Ms. White?
Yes,
what are they looking for career-wise after leaving school?
Well, me personally, I'm looking to further my education in actuarial science. I'm not so sure about law. Calicia? Danny?
I will be a future attorney. This is Danny here, by the way.
Okay, Danique. So we have an attorney there. We have a scientist. And that's our second speaker.
Okay, esteemed adjudicators, I must say that in future, I intend to study medical physics with a double major in radiotherapy.
Very good, very good. So we have some speakers that are able to look at both sides of the spectrum, scientists and lawyers. And Wolmer's girls, can we hear from you? Are you going to be scientists and lawyers as well?
Okay, so I want to be a lawyer. I would like to be a lawyer. And that's
a lawyer. Okay, you want to be
medical engineer.
I didn't hear that.
Yes, I would like to become a biomedical engineer.
Oh, wow. You know, in my days when I was going to school, it was lawyer, doctor, teacher, and probably that's it. But that's very good. I commend you. I see you have your masks on. Everybody have their masks on this morning. And I'm so glad we're taking the responsibility to social distance and protect ourselves. Let us just check in with our judges. I'm sure they're going to take a long time to deliberate. We have once again our Chief Judge, Stacy Young, Robin Russell, first Vice President of the Jamaica Hotel and Tourist Association, and Sharon
Yes, Michelle, we're ready.
Judges, are we ready?
Yes, we are.
Name.
Danielle, can you unmute the mics? Judges, your mic.
It's on mute on our side. I don't know if you're hearing us.
We're not hearing.
I'm hearing.
We're not hearing.
Everybody hearing but you.
I'm here. I think the issue is on her end because I'm
You're
hearing.
hearing.
Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. I'm seeing mostly ladies, but I'm sure that there's some.
I'm not hearing.
Michelle, it appears that you're the only one not hearing.
I'm gonna send her a message.
Michelle.
Is she hearing you now?
Yes, I'm
Michelle.
hearing.
Okay, great.
I'm hearing you now.
All right. Good morning again, everyone. Really very riveting match. As you saw at one point, we were so overloaded with information that we had to take a pause to kind of just, gather our thoughts so that we could record the really great arguments that were being presented. And I just want to say a job well done to all of you. I know that the level of preparation that it takes to get to the level that you are at. And I must congratulate both teams again, because both sets of presentations were very well researched. And the level of argument, I found it to be, we as the judges found it to be really good at a very high level. So just take a moment to just congratulate yourselves and give yourselves a round of applause. As you know, guys, this COVID pandemic has affected us in ways that we never thought possible. Even the way that we do school, even the ways that we now do these competitions. So it causes us to not take certain liberties for granted. And when we come to a competition like this, one of the things that we do when we're giving feedback is to try to assist the schools, even if you don't progress to the next round, because we're looking forward to having you again when the competition comes around again. We want you to take the comments that we make on board so that it really does improve your presentation skills. I was listening very ardently, even though we were doing our tabulations. Even though not everyone wants to be an attorney, the truth of the matter is that the skills you develop when you do public speaking, these are life skills. Even if you are going to go into the boardroom, even as a scientist, if you're making presentations, these skills are going to take you through and assist you in your development. And so too, when we give you comments as judges, our comments are really geared to influence you and to assist you with your personal development. So I'm just gonna go straight into the comments. Both teams, as we said, the level of preparation was clear. You were really, both proposers and opposers had really researched the topic. There were statistics flying left and right and center, and it made us very excited. Even though you couldn't see or hear, but we were very excited over here. Robin has had years of service in the tourist industry, and so he is really au fait with the topic as well as the statistics. So he is very well poised to say whether or not the information that is coming from our presenters is accurate and timely, or it is relevant to the topic at hand. Cheryl is in the education industry, and I myself, I'm an advocate as an attorney. So your judges are very in a position to really give you good feedback. our first speaker who opened from Mannings, we found that you were a very strong speaker. We loved the fact that you were able to summarize your arguments and also to say what your other speakers were coming with. The statistics, as we said, was really awesome, and your gestures. You know, you also spoke about the exemption. So you put the entire argument in context. So what you said was, yes, no movement days are there, but there are exemptions. So you basically said, you know, while it is that some persons can't move, you have persons, the government has thought ahead and said, not everybody is locked down, it's not a total lockdown, persons are exempted, and so you were able to give us the other side of things. However, we found though, the fact that you took the moot as it is, without making definitions, because you said, because the words are plain words, we don't need to define anything. I think that was a bit, I would rethink that approach, primarily because when you don't define your moot, even if you use very simple terms, you do not set the parameters of your presentation and speech. So while it is that everybody will know what visitors are, and you took it for granted that everybody knew what the private sector was, I would rethink that approach, because sometimes when you, as I said, when you define certain things, even in one very short line, it sets the parameters for the arguments to come, and it really makes it a little more tidy. For the first speaker for Wolmer, she was also an extremely strong speaker. Her greeting was awesome. She introduced herself just the same like the first speaker, with the summaries and the other speakers who are coming and how they're going to deal with the opposing the mood. But the difference was her definition. She set the definitions, and therefore we were able to say, okay, when she speaks of the private sector, this is what she's talking about. When she speaks of visitors, this is what she's talking about. And her statistics were well presented as well. She used quotations, which we picked up on. But what we found, and some of the time, and I'm hoping that you're taking these suggestions on board, you do not always have to wait until the rebuttals or until the end to start addressing arguments that were made by the previous speaker. So if it is that somebody just spoke, what we find, the debate style, you can even pick up one argument that was just presented by the first speaker, and you can start breaking those arguments and taking them apart from the get-go. So if you can reserve probably a 30-second, 20-second in your first presentation as an opposer to pick up one thing that the first person said and just start deconstructing it from the get-go, it builds on your presentation. So as an opposer, that's just a pointer for persons who are opposing moving forward. That is also something that is good. Our second speaker for Mannings, let me get her name correctly, Kalisha, Miss Vassal. You are a very, very, very strong speaker. As a matter of fact, it was because of the lack of glasses. One person had glasses and the other person, because the hairstyle is the same. So I was wondering, is it the same person coming back? And then I said, oh, but this one not wearing glasses, so no, it's a different person. Ms. Vassal, you are an extremely strong speaker, but listen to me now. You have to be careful about your pace, because what is going to happen, especially because we are using electronic means and we're depending on the wonderful Flow or Digicel to give us good service. We know sometimes the service is not that great, regardless of the intentions. So when you do not speak slowly and you're such a strong vocal speaker, a lot is lost. We missed a lot of what you were saying because your pace was a little off. So when you're a strong speaker, you have to be aware of your strength, and you have to slow down so that your strength is measured and we get more emphasis from what you're saying. You also went over by a few minutes. So you have to be very careful about your organization, because you will lose points if you are going over time. And in some debates of this nature, when a person goes over by even 30 seconds or a minute, the other team can raise a point of order. You know the way you can raise a point of information? You can raise a point of order. So when somebody or the other team has been going on in excess of the time that they've been going on, it would have been perfectly within the right of Wolmer's girls at that point to raise a point of order. Because what that means is that they may be on, there would be an imbalance in terms of how much you get to say with the other side. So it will be a bit unfair if you get more time when the other person doesn't. So that is something I want you guys moving forward, any competition at all, to be very careful about. Another thing, I'm going to say it as well, be very careful to stay away from anything that could cause some kind of negative view. So for example, you mentioned the Mocha Fest as something that would have shown that persons can come. But remember that particular event had some negative connotations about, you know, how some people were given the leeway and some was not. So I would, and I'm really just giving you these pointers so that you understand. While it is that it might be a good example to say persons were allowed to come, was it a good example because of what happened? A lot of persons, was it, and even if you're using it as an example, it's a rocky example because it was not legal, strictly speaking. You understand what I mean? The way that it was held in terms of the permissions that were given, was this a proper exempted event? So we would stay away from using those examples. You didn't think we were listening, not true. You hear everything, and we made notes of everything. You know, strong point, any deviation was due to COVID, not to no movement, and you gave comparison of arrival information, the examples given of the American Airlines and the cruise ship. You went into really great detail, so we really appreciated that. And then we had the second speaker for Wolmer's. You repeated the moot, which was really good. So we could not lose sight of what it is that you were speaking about. Dealing with the locals, and then you also went back. So having defined your private sector, you then spoke about locals, but then you said, listen, you dealt with the private sector according to the definition, and you said, it will not suffice tourism if they're not interacting with the people, so you were able to tie it in. But the only other thing that we would say for you, second speaker, let me get her name correct, Ms. McDuffos, yeah, when you are making presentations, it doesn't hurt to look at the paper, but remember that it does detract from your presentation if it is that you're reading too much. So just be careful about when you're making presentations and you're using the paper, don't appear to be reading too much, because even if you're strong, but in your eye contact is important. So if we're not seeing your eyes and you're not looking at us, you'll just be a much more convincing speaker when you are looking directly at the audience, or even if you glance at the paper, you look up again and you address the audience. And you had it in your hand as well. So if you find that if the paper is here on the table and you glance at the paper and you look up, that's different. But when you hold up the paper, it can be a little bit distracting and it takes away a little bit from your presentation. Third speaker from Mannings, again, really good speaker. You summarized for the previous speakers, that was good. You spoke of the exemptions, and that was good as well. You spoke about the new subsector emerging, which we found very good. But again, we found that you were reading a little and you were within time, so that is very good time management. Then we had the third speaker for Wolmer, and what we all agreed as judges, coming out of hearing, the other 5 speakers before and coming to our third speaker from Wolmer's, we thought set the tone. It's almost like there was like some kind of reset, and then she just started fresh. We love the way she summarized for the previous speakers. We love the way she did the comparison between other countries. She even went back to the definitions and tied the entire thing back. And even though the third speaker for Wolmer's had the least amount of time to do her presentation, all the judges agreed that she would be the best speaker. So you see, you don't have to be the person with the most time to get the best speaker, but it is what you do with the time that you have. And even though Ms. Bromfield is in another room somewhere, Mr. Russell is to my left doing his own thing and I'm to my right, when we tabulated and did our comments, all three judges agreed when we called Ms. Bromfield that the best speaker we found for this competition was the third speaker for Wolmer's. And so we just want to give her a round of applause and just congratulate her. Really, really clear, really, really concise. And she was able to tie in everything to what they had originally started off with. Then we have the rebuttals. Again, very, very smart move, Wolmer's, to use that young lady to come back and just, her name is Aaliyah Thompson, to use Aaliyah with her style. I don't know if it's her particular style of presentation, but she was very punchy, very short, very direct, and very clear. And so for us, the better rebuttal again was the rebuttal from Wolmer's girls and Miss Thompson. With that short amount of time and her style and her presentation, that was a better rebuttal for us. Kalicia, again, what happened with you was just because of your pace, the fast pace, very, very strong. So I would love to see Kalicia, I would love to see you again when you are making a presentation with a different pace. So I really, really enjoy hearing you, but you need to just check your pace. It was very good. You were highlighting the points from the other team, and that was good as well, because what I found good about what you did was that there were points in the other team's presentation that you thought was actually making the same points you were making, and you raised that. So that was really, really good about the way you did your rebuttal. But again, because the need to slow down and because, you know, in the end, you got a little flustered, which you can understand, but it was really, really difficult, but it just gave Aaliyah the edge over you, if you understand what I mean, because had you probably had a good pace, you know, didn't get so flustered because you were really, you know, saying, but they said this, but they're agreeing with us, and they said this, but they're agreeing with us. You have to. It was a little difficult to pick, but in the end, the consensus was we went with Kalicia. Aaliyah was Aaliyah as the best rebuttal as well. So overall, the scores we have Mannings high. We don't.
We didn't tabulate.
Oh, we didn't. We're going to tabulate all the scores and send them out to you. But the winner of the debate for this first round, moving forward from the preliminary round, will be Wolmer's girls, based on the consensus of all three judges. So give them a hand for me. Round of applause for Wolmer's girls. We were having a little difficulty. We have the scores tabulated for both judges here, but we're gonna get the other score from Miss Bromfield. But the consensus was based on what we had verbally, that the winner of the first preliminary round will be Wolmer's girls. So Wolmer's.
Okay, thank you, judges. You did a wonderful job. Congratulations to our winners, Wolmer's girls. This has been a fantastic debate, as she said, and I saw it myself when it started. We'd like to thank our participating audience. Please stay with us for the other two competitions today, 12 and 1:30. If you need additional information on how to access the link, we do have a production team, and it would not be possible without our production team members here from One Love TV, Daniel Dehaney, Jamie Drummond, and Rashid Dono, our timekeeper. A special thanks to you, Our Chief Judge Stacey Young, you did a wonderful job. I know you would have broken it down for the students that even after leaving this, it would have been a learning experience. Robin Russell, First Vice President of the JHTA, and Cheryl Bromfield from the Ministry of Education, who is zooming in with us from Kingston. I'm your host, Michelle Tuller. Thank you, coaches, Miss White and Miss Elliott. Congratulations once again to Wolmer's girls.